Welcome to the Same Day Podcast, where we discuss driving incremental business growth and other topics related to real estate, property management, and entrepreneurship. Now to the show at hand.
Matt Zolk here. I'm the host of the Same Day Podcast, where I connect with top business experts and real estate leaders. Past guests include Brooke Reuter talking about contract for deed versus lease to own options. Scott Reeves of Chickasaw Community Bank talking about commercial banking options. Those are great podcasts, worth a listen for sure, especially in these changing interest rate environments. Today's episode is brought to you by Keyrenter Property Management. At Keyrenter Property Management, we are a full-service property management company helping our clients buy, renovate, and operate real estate assets. We help our clients build wealth while taking the headache out of property management. And that's why no matter what rentals you have, single family homes, condos, townhomes, apartments, we have the management solutions you need. Go to keyrenterpmc.com or email us at info@keyrenterpmc.com. Today's guest is Trevor Riddle. Trevor is a seasoned attorney with nearly 20 years of experience practicing people law, as he calls it. And we'll hear more about that here shortly. From real estate and business planning to protecting individual freedoms, Trevor has built a reputation for serving clients with empathy, understanding, and trust. Trevor serves clients throughout Oklahoma and Kansas. Trevor Riddle, Esquire, welcome to the show. Are you actually an Esquire? Is that like is Esquire like a specific type of attorney that you were the person in like old England that was, is there Esquire and barrister or something like that?
I think all attorneys qualify as Esquire. It's one of those series of letters you can place after your name.
That's right. All right.
I've never used it because it seemed too fancy for me.
Yeah.
So
I mean, through Zoom, you can put on your little like Esquire wig and pretend we're in 18th century.
That's right. Yeah, I need a white wig and powdered face and big collar and things.
Exactly. We're going to talk about the Corporate Transparency Act, beneficial ownership information, all that stuff. But before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself, your Esquire credentials, if you will. You and I have worked on some other stuff besides Corporate Transparency Act stuff, namely wills, trust, probate, whatever, that kind of stuff. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, so I'm born and raised Oklahoman, grew up here just outside of Oklahoma City. Proud graduate and alumni of Oklahoma State University.
That may offend some of our viewers, but
it's just something that kind of goes with the territory. I mean, it's the way it is, right? If someone doesn't want to come work with me because I'm a lead partnership, so be it.
It's a battle in our office. My God, I'm like.
Well, at the risk of offending even more people, I will say that I got my JD. I became an Esquire at the University of Kansas School of Law.
Got it.
Another Big 12.
I think we can end it here. There's not going to be any business developed in this session.
Never mind. We'll find someone else to talk about this topic. So
just kidding.
Yeah. Anyway, so I went to law school, University of Kansas. I graduated there in 2005, and for the next almost going on 20 years now, have practiced what I've heard other people refer to as people law. So I represent individuals and small businesses who are owned by I like to work the mom and pop type businesses who are starting off, small businesses, to really help them solve problems and hopefully avoid problems, which kind of what brought us to this conversation today, which is the Corporate Transparency Act and all of the uncertainty wrought by it.
This was a 2021 piece of legislation that's just now kind of coming into effect. Is that right?
Yeah, strangely. This law really kind of flew under the radar for a long time. Even many practitioners that I talked to, other lawyers, CPAs, other professionals who were going to have to deal with this, until almost for many people, even as late as last year, didn't really know much about it. But yeah, it's titled the Corporate Transparency Act. So it was passed by Congress in 2001. Became law.
Wait, 2001 or 20?
Sorry, 2021.
Okay.
Sorry, 2021. I had terrorism on the mind, so I went back to 2001. But and the reason for that is because, without going too deep into the weeds, I mean, a lot of people may see this law and see some of the requirements and think, just another government regulation.
Overreach.
But there is some legitimate interest that the Congress has had in dealing with this, and so it really comes down to the ease at which people can start businesses, which is a good thing in this country. This country continues to be very friendly towards small business, including making it pretty easy to start a small business. So think of, for most people, that's going to be an LLC, right? A limited liability company. Most states, Oklahoma included, make it very easy to start one of those, right? You can literally go to the Secretary of State's website, fill out an online form, pay $100 filing fee, and you have an LLC.
Yeah.
That's great. It makes it easy for small business owners, people looking to get into business, to kind of get going with that formal structure. It's also generally pretty private for most states, Oklahoma included. You have to provide very little information about who owns that particular business. And so, again, all great for business. The ease of creation and the kind of limited information that has to be shared has also made it very useful for people who might be up to more nefarious things. So money laundering, and particularly the financing of terrorism, which is why I went back to that 2001 misstatement there. And so, honestly, the United States has been under a lot of pressure 10 or more years to kind of be more proactive about tracking money as it flows through some of these business entities. Most people have probably heard the term shell company, and never really thought maybe much about what that meant, but that's kind of what it means, right? You can have an LLC that owns an LLC that owns an LLC that owns an LLC, and it's very hard to track back who actually, the people behind the ownership. And because of that, it's become pretty easy for people to engage in acts of illegal activities, money laundering, financing terrorism, other things. So Congress had a pretty legitimate interest in trying to get out in front of this. And that's what brought us the Corporate Transparency Act.
Who's been putting pressure on the United States? Other countries?
Other countries. It's really kind of an international efforts, right? So it's international effort to fight terrorism. So
but other countries then are more transparent in their business ownership. Whatever.
I think, I am certainly not an expert on international business, but there are certainly countries who have taken kind of a bigger swing at trying to create some more transparency, or at least allow certain government entities to track this information.
Got it.
And this may get a bit into the weeds, but for those people who are concerned about this being another more government overreach and having to just provide more information to the government that's out there for anybody's use, the Corporate Transparency Act and the rules that have been put in place are in part intended to keep the information that's disclosed through what they call these beneficial ownership reports mostly secure and private. So they're not just a matter of public record. So no, Dick or Jane can go online and look up your company's beneficial ownership report
until Snowden or Anonymous or somebody hacks
absolutely
and launches a data dump that just says
is FinCEN the government, the financial enforcement network, which is the kind of arm of the Department of the Treasury that's been put in place of this, handling this. Are they up to the task of keeping all of this information private?
Yeah.
Time will tell. But at least as well as the rules are written, the information is available to very limited government agencies for very limited purposes. And really it's law enforcement purposes, if you want to get down to it, right? I mean, the whole purpose of this is to be able to track money laundering, terrorism financing, those sort of things. So
it's FBI basically.
Yeah, I mean, certainly federal law enforcement agencies are going to have access to this as part of ongoing criminal investigations, which again was the whole purpose behind this law.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about it for a second. Corporate Transparency Act passed by Congress in 2021, goes into effect this year, and so all companies, LLCs, S corps, and any type of, I guess I shouldn't say S corp, corporations. I mean, all sorts of companies have to then register the beneficial ownership information. Is that right?
Unless it is unless you are operating as a sole proprietor, more than likely, if you own a business entity, you are going to be required to comply with the reporting requirements. So basically, the way what they call a reporting company, that's the designation for a company that's required to file these reports, is in broad terms any company that has had, in order to create itself, filed some document with its governing state agency. So as we mentioned, right, going online to the Oklahoma Secretary of State's website and filing that LLC paperwork, that's a triggering event that would bring your LLC, your company, kind of under the umbrella of this reporting requirement.
And
so
so,
again, with the exception of a sole proprietor who's never filed any sort of document, you're just operating a business without any sort of formal recognition by the state. With that exception, the vast majority of businesses are going to at least initially kind of come under the gambit of this.
But so just so I understand, a sole proprietor is somebody who has no protection afforded under an LLC. So I'm Johnny Pool Cleaner and I'm operating as Johnny Pool Cleaner. And if somebody sues me directly, they're not suing any sort of business entity. They're suing me, Johnny the Pool Cleaner.
Yeah. You may be Johnny the Pool Cleaner, and you may have a business card that says Johnny the Pool Cleaner Guy. And that may be your business, how you're operating, but for all intents and purposes, you're just Johnny, right?
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because so when you go to file your taxes every year, you're filing taxes. Your income just comes in on your personal income tax.
Right.
So
right.
The government's not worried about those folks because they're tracking you by way of your personal income tax returns.
So under the Corporate Transparency Act, who needs to then go in and file this beneficial? What did you call it? You called it a BOE. I think.
So it's called it's a beneficial ownership interest report. So it is a report through FinCEN to report any person or entity that has a quote beneficial ownership interest in the company.
So if I have a company and it's 50-50, I go in and I do a BOIR, and then I tell my partner in this company, you also need to fill out a BOIR. And if my partner doesn't, it makes me look bad or what?
So yes and no. Both. So let's take that example. Let's say you have an LLC. You have two owners, 50-50 owners. Yes, each of those owners would have to report their beneficial ownership interest. The difference is it actually is done on just one reporting. So you file one report. So what they call a reporting company would be your company. So ABC LLC is the company. You file a report on behalf of that company, and that single report requires you to disclose all persons or entities that are qualify as having a beneficial ownership interest. So it's yes, both people are reporting, but it's done under one single report with FinCEN.
Got it. So then if there's 10 individuals and whoever is taking charge of this in ABC LLC, I say, I'm Matt and I'm going to take responsibility for doing this, and I'll go ahead and report all 10 of your names.
Correct.
So that I guess answers my next question, which is in this case, my second partner, the person that owns 50% of the LLC, and I no longer speak. We're at odds, and he doesn't want to go or she doesn't want to go report this thing. It's not gonna affect me because I just put his or her name down along with a social security number or whatever you have to do, and then the company is protected in essence, has done what they need to do according to the Corporate Transparency Act.
That's correct. Okay. Yeah.
So what's so complicated about this?
There are some gotchas involved in this, right?
Okay.
So obviously. So let's just kind of start here just with basically what's required to be provided to FinCEN in one of these reports. So obviously we just mentioned it, right? They call it a beneficial ownership interest. So that would be any person or entity that owns 25% or more of the company. That's pretty easy to determine.
Mm-hmm.
What's less easy to determine is what they refer to as a person or entity who has a controlling interest in the company.
Okay.
So this would be anybody, any person or entity who has some level of control and exercises that control on, quote, on behalf of the company. So let's say you have a small corporation, closely held corporation. And so you have basically shareholders in that corporation. But the shareholders have also created a board of directors. So you have an executive, a director of the board. You may have other members of the board who exercise decision-making power on behalf of the corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Those individuals are also likely required to be listed on the beneficial ownership interest report because they exercise control on behalf of the company, even if those people don't have any ownership interest in the company itself.
Wow.
So they
That's
say
pretty subjective.
It can be. Yes, it can be. Frankly, the example I gave is probably one of the clearer examples of when you would have somebody or more than one person exercising control on behalf of a company.
Yeah.
But you can certainly get into the weeds here where it becomes very unclear as to whether someone's exercising control, quote unquote, on behalf of the company.
And then it just seems like in the event that some federal agency or FinCEN believes that somebody has control, they would have to take you to court. Now you're in a lawsuit to determine whether somebody has control of an entity. It seems, I mean, I'm married, you're married. Our spouses have way more control than we may want to admit. So do I have to put my spouse on a, I mean, I may go to my spouse and say, do you think I should sell this property in an LLC that I own? She may say, no, I don't think that's a good idea. Is that control? I mean, it is control. Do I now need to put her on as a beneficial owner for an entity that she has nothing to do with?
No, you bring up a good question. And that's actually a question that has been asked, I've heard by others, particularly not so much in Oklahoma, but in states where, again, don't get too deep in the weeds here, but in states where marital property is considered a community property state.
Mm-hmm.
So states like California, for example, are considered community property states where spouses are deemed to equally own assets. That question has been brought up. Where in a community property state, is the spouse, husband is listed as the owner of the LLC, but is the spouse considered a quote unquote beneficial owner of that company because it's community property?
But it seems like
there are a lot. Again, you can get very deep into the weeds. I do a lot of work, as we mentioned earlier, with folks doing estate planning. And there's a lot of overlap there working with individuals setting up their personal estate planning documents. A lot of times, somebody's created a trust for their personal estate planning vehicle. Yep. And maybe they are looking at transferring ownership of their LLC over to their trust, again, for estate planning purposes. Well, now that trust becomes an owner of the LLC. How does that get reported on this beneficial ownership report?
Yeah.
You have to list the trustees. Some people have suggested that you may even have to list out the beneficiaries who are named in the trust on these beneficial ownership reports. So those things are, when you get into a lot of these one-off or less evident scenarios, are things that really at this point are very much unknown and are still in a very gray area.
But
I would say what I am, anytime that you are subjecting yourself to the potential of criminal prosecution, what I tell clients is until you don't want to be the test case, is what I tell people. And so until someone else has been the test case and we have clarification, either from the courts or from FinCEN or Congress, you should probably err on the side of caution. Because at minimum, you're risking significant fines. At worst, people are risking, criminal prosecution.
But so I'm on the e-filing BOI website right now. I've done a couple of these. And so you just when you go through these, you go to beneficial owner and you just keep adding people's names to get to the 20 people. I mean, I'm trying to think. I was in real estate, it's very common to have a general partnership and a limited partnership, and they may be one entity and they may be two entities, right? So for an asset that I used to own, an apartment complex, we had the general partnership. We had 3 general partners. So we'd put all those beneficial owners, and then in the limited partnership, which is a separate, it was, ABC Property LP, meaning limited partnership. We are all three of us in the general partnership. We're also part of the limited partnership for a different cap stack, part of a different capital stack. And so we'd put all 25 people that were in that limited partnership. I mean, it's crazy. And then the question,
every single one of those entities is required to again, with some exceptions, which we can talk about, but very frankly, I'm sure most of your listeners are probably not going to fall into one of those exceptions. But yes, for most business owners, each of those entities is going to be considered a reporting company subject to the requirements.
I just think like at some level it becomes insane that for the spouse example, if they really wanted, if they started digging into one of our LLCs and they said, well, who are the real beneficial owner? Well, it just turns out your spouse has a controlling interest. You can make a decision, at night in the marital bedroom or whatever. Like they can come to you and say, ABC LLC, show me your operating agreement. Tell me like your spouse is here. Like they can do all that digging during some sort of deposition during discovery of a lawsuit. So why do they need that? And why can they catch you in this trap? Anyways, it seems insane. But you were talking about a couple of edge cases. The first edge case that you mentioned, again, say it one more time, and then we'll talk about the second.
Yeah, I mean, one I wanted to jump to this one. Yes, unless I missed it. Oh, the control, obviously, is the first one. And this brings me to the second gotcha on this, and that is that not only is the company itself, so what they call the reporting company, required to report itself, but the individual who was responsible for filing the initial company creation documents. So in our example, the LLC that gets filed with the Secretary of State, the individual that was responsible for actually creating and filing that document also has to be listed on the beneficial ownership interest report. So before we started recording, I gave the example of my practice, right? So I help a lot of individuals who in their business entity creation. So I will be the one who goes online and logs into my account to the Secretary of State and files on their behalf the articles of organization for their LLC. Because I'm the one that actually physically filed that document online with the LLC, with the Secretary of State, I'm required to be listed on the beneficial ownership interest report. Now, there's some caveats to that.
Because why though? Hold on. Because you may have been a part of forming the money laundering,
correct,
nefarious thing. Okay, and what? And so you're an ultimate beneficiary of the nefarious act, of the proceeds of the nefarious activity, or you're somehow in cahoots. I mean, it's a little bit like the immigration checkbox that says I am not a terrorist, nor have I ever, been involved in terrorist activity. So that if somebody is found to be involved in terrorist activity, they can go back to if nothing else, if they can't prove anything else, they prove something, and then they go, look, you lied on your immigration checkbox. Please leave our country. So it's like another kind of.
I would love to say I know exactly what Congress and FinCEN's motives were for going to kind of that level of reporting. I'm not sure I can give you a great answer to that, other than to say I think they were very interested in making sure that they identified on an individual level everyone involved in the creation, ownership, and operation of a business entity. And so I think that's probably why the level of detail. Now, there's a caveat to that, because I think FinCEN recognized just how onerous it would be to make every business entity.
Yeah.
Those are already in existence prior to January 1st of 2024, abide by each and like every single one of these rules. So, for instance, one of the caveats is if it is a business entity that was in existence prior to January 1st, 2024, those companies are not required to list the individual that actually filed their entity formation documents. Because some of these companies may have been around, let's say your company's been around for 20 years, and 20 years ago you hired some attorney to file the documents for you. You may not know who that is now or even remember. So they gave some leniency on that. So that requirement is only kind of moving forward. So for business entities that are formed on or after January 1st, 2024, that kind of extra filing requirement is in place.
So let's consider then that there are 300, let's call it for round numbers, 300 million Americans. 5% of them, 15 million Americans will have a business entity, and I have no clue whether that's insanely high, insanely low, or relatively.
It's low by about, the estimate is that you're low by about half.
So there'll be 30 million people that own or entities?
Of these beneficial ownership interest reports that will have.
Okay. So I was thinking the average person would have 2. So I'm roughly right. So there's 5 million, 15 million business owners, and the average owner probably does not just have one business. They're going to have more than one business. I mean, I'm an outlier. We have 15 or something. Various real estate, and many real estate investors have tons of different entities. So you're going to have 15, 30, maybe 45 million of these things. The question is, how is the government going to access this, have this database, be able to use it for anything? We have 30 to 45 million line entries in some database somewhere that they can query with various, how many. I saw the other day, I was looking at an LLC, and it was a masonry company, and they had left out the N. So it was like masonry. It was like ABC masonry. Okay, well, all the general liability documents and the 1099 say masonry. And now the entity with the Secretary of State actually says masonry. So there's all sorts of these Scribner's errors. There will continue to be more and more Scribner's errors associated with the filing of these actual entities. I doubt the masonry company is going to recreate that same error when they file the thing. So you're going to have dirty data, inaccessible due to its quantity, and then you've got various entities that can access it and probably mess up the database at some level, start changing things around. And then you've got data breaches. Who's going to crack the database and then make the first dump of everything that Donald Trump owns, or whoever else? It's a little bit daunting, quite scary, and seems of questionable impact. But I guess this is the nature of the federal government.
All valid questions and concerns. The how will this be enforced and policed is always a valid question when you have a law and a rule that's put in place that brings under its umbrella so many people and entities. You're right. I mean, think of that. I mean, again, the estimate right now is some 30 million business entities currently in existence will be required to file these reports. The other estimate is somewhere in excess of 2 to 3 million new filings every year moving forward. So that's between new business entities being created, because keep in mind, just because you file one of these things once doesn't mean you're done. If you ever make any change to your business, you're required to update that filing.
An address, or what sort of change?
Beneficial ownership.
Okay.
So let's go back to our 2-owner LLC example. If you mentioned you're not communicating with your partner, if you decide to buy out your partner, now that partner is gone. You now own 100%. You have to file a new report. Or you bring in a third partner, now you each own a third. You'd have to file an updated report to add that new beneficial owner. Or frankly, you have the corporation and you change directors. You may have to file a new report because you may now have a new director that's exercising control on behalf of the corporation.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if there's also, for companies that used to do business in an LLC name that have now retired the LLC name, will they need to, that will just kind of die in the database. I guess they don't need to actually report the closure of that, presumably.
Correct. I don't think so. And that is, and that's also actually one of the exceptions to entities that would have to file. So let's say you have a business entity that's kind of gone dormant, you're not using. It is part of the exception to the entities are required to report now. There are some other things that go along with that. So it's not just that it's a dormant entity.
Yeah.
There's factors that go along with it. But yes, dormant or kind of abandoned entities could fall into one of the exceptions. The other exceptions are things like banks, savings and loan departments, CPAs are not subject to it. I think probably because they have some fairly rigorous reporting requirements on their own. Any business that's required to register under the Securities and Exchange Act generally is exempted from this because they generally have their own reporting requirements that can be tracked. So those are exemptions. One exemption that could apply to folks is if the company employs more than 20 people on a full-time basis, and on their last year's tax return, they have reported more than $5 million in revenue. They are also exempted.
They don't need to file.
Correct.
What's the logic there?
I think because of the size of the company, basically, I think the way this came about is large companies, certainly publicly traded ones, and then even again larger ones, are subject to other rules and regulations such that their ownership is generally known or can be more easily determined. You know, the real vehicle for, again, this illegal activity are these kind of small, really LLCs, single owner or LLCs. Again, the LLC that's owned by the LLC that's owned by the LLC
Sure.
that's owned by the LLC, right? These shell companies that really have no really business activity. They have no employees. They have no assets. They're just there to move money.
Yeah.
And so I think the thinking was, if you have a big enough company, why they set it at 20 employees, who knows? Why $5 million, who knows? They have to set a threshold somewhere to say, at some point, you're a big enough company, even if you're an LLC, that we're not going to require you to file these ownership interest reports. So.
Interesting. So if you reported more than $5 million, I don't think is there anything on the tax that on your tax return that indicates how many employees a company would have had? I don't recall seeing anything on my filings that say,
I don't think so, other than you're probably, if you have full-time employees, you're going to be generating W-2s.
Yeah.
So that the IRS is going to know that, how many
Yeah.
W-2s you've issued. So I assume that would be the way they would likely track it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So if somebody wants to not navigate this road on their own, but rather have a professional, namely an Esquire, handle some of this Corporate Transparency Act and BOIR filings done for them, how would they reach out to you, and what do they need to give you? What sort of details do they need to provide to you so that you could handle this for them and make sure they're on the straight and narrow?
Yeah, I'm always happy to talk to anyone, small business owner, about this. I will say, just so your listeners kind of understand the scope of this, the FinCEN has kind of implemented a kind of staggered approach to enforcing this. So if you have a business entity that was formed prior to January 1st of 2024, you have until the end of this year to file your beneficial ownership interest report. So they give you a full year to do it. If you have a business entity that was formed basically during 2024, so after January 1st, but before December 31st, FinCEN is giving those entities 90 days to file their initial report. After that, any business that is formed essentially after January 1st of 2025, the standard rule will be 30 days. So 30 days after entity formation, they'll have to file it. The same goes for any change in report. So let's say you have a company that was in existence prior to January 1st. Let's say on January 1st, then they filed their beneficial ownership interest report. And then in June, they added a new member to the LLC. They'll have 30 days then, regardless of when they were formed, to file an amended report.
So I can see how the Secretary of State can upload a spreadsheet, a CSV or Excel file, and report it to FinCEN, and FinCEN can say, hey, these new companies that were formed on January 1st, 2025 haven't reported within 30 days, but adding a new member to an LLC is an operating agreement change that's not submitted for any sort of oversight. How would they have any clue unless by?
Yeah, that goes back to that. How are they going to enforce and police this? And that's a good question. I don't know. Yeah, you're right. Because for instance, in Oklahoma, there are very limited filing requirements with the Secretary of State. I mean, you're required to file a yearly, an annual certificate, but that doesn't require you to disclose ownership
Changes. Yeah.
So I'm not sure, but yeah. So to go to back to the question you posed there. I'm always happy to talk to small business owners about this. Give me a call. I can give you phone number, email. I'm always happy to do that. If you want people who want me to handle this for them, I've tried to make it as easy as possible. I actually have kind of an online questionnaire that folks can go on, fill out. It will provide me with the information that I need to submit that report for you, including uploading you went through this, so you know this is required, uploading an image of usually either, for most people, it's probably going to be their driver's license. So for each beneficial owner, you're required to provide FinCEN with one of a few varieties of formal identification. So that's either a valid driver's license, a valid state identification, or a valid passport. I think there may be a couple of others, but for most people, it's going to be a driver's license, maybe a passport. But you're actually not only required to provide that your driver's license or passport number, but an actual image of that document. So the questionnaire I have has a document upload, so you can take a picture of that with your iPhone and upload it, and that the way I have that to submit. So
is this going to? I mean, there are huge numbers of new businesses started every year that are attributed to immigrants. Many, I presume, legal, many illegal. Does this stop an illegal, somebody that's come into the country illegally but wants to, provide for their family and does lawn care services, construction, auto painting, detailing, that kind of stuff? I mean, it prevents them from being in compliance with this. It's just yet another obstacle for them to kind of go on their way and open a new business, I guess, because they don't have a state issued ID, driver's license, whatever else.
Yes, yeah, potentially. Now there are within these reporting rules some separate procedures for foreign individuals or entities owning, having a beneficial ownership interest in a domestic company. So the reporting rules are a little bit different. I haven't delved into those deeply yet, and I'm certainly also not an immigration attorney or an expert on that. So what other rules will be in place for a perhaps non-citizen to own a business? I wouldn't comment on that, but I do believe there has been some effort within this FinCEN's procedure to allow for foreign nationals or for foreign entities to report their beneficial ownership interest.
Cool. What's the website where people can go and start filling out some of those forms if they want your help navigating?
Yeah, easiest way to go is to go to my website. There's an easy contact form there. So it's just, it's Riddle, RIDDLE .law is the website. So riddle.law. We have an easy contact form there. You can fill it out, or you can even schedule a quick call with me right from the website. So that's usually what I ask people to do. Go there, schedule a call. We can take 15 minutes to talk, kind of get an idea about their business, and then move forward. Then I send them the short online questionnaire. They provide the information, and I kind of take it from there.
Cool. Trevor Riddle is a seasoned attorney with nearly 20 years of experience practicing what he calls people law.
People law.
From estate and business planning to protecting individual freedoms, Trevor has built a reputation for serving clients with empathy, understanding, and trust. Trevor serves clients throughout Oklahoma and Kansas. Trevor, we appreciate you being on the show and telling us a little bit about the Corporate Transparency Act and the associated filing requirements.
Mr. Zalk, it's been my pleasure, sir.
Good to chat. Thank you.
You too. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Same Day Podcast. Tune in to a new show each week and be sure to subscribe to get future episodes.